Hey, do you want to grow cherry tomato plants like this? Hi, my name is Lucas, and growing cherry tomatoes can be extremely fun and rewarding. And given the right conditions, the plants can produce these waterfalls of beautiful, juicy cherry tomatoes that you can put in your salad or just eat straight off the vine. I'm usually quite successful growing cherry tomatoes, so today I thought I'd give you some of my tips and tricks to grow super tall, productive plants. Let's get started. The first thing you want to think about when growing cherry tomatoes is variety. Now this is very important because depending on where you live, you want to pick a variety that's going to grow well in your climate. So this variety right here is called Sun Gold. It's an orange cherry tomato. It's super sweet and a lot of gardeners grow it because it's just one of those really good producers in a lot of different climates. So if you live in an area like me that's a little cooler, you want to pick varieties that have a really short days to maturity. This is going to ensure that you're going to harvest the maximum number of fruits before that first frost hits in your area. If you live in a southern climate, there's a lot of great varieties out there for you as well. So just do a bit of research, flip through some seed catalogs, and I'm sure you can find a variety that would fit well for your area. If you're growing tomatoes up a single stem like this, you got to continuously prune them and ensure that they're growing straight up the stake. I come out to my garden every few days, and if there's any suckers growing on the tomato plants between the main stem and a leaf branch, I just pick those out or cut them if they're too large. So it's important to tie up your cherry tomato plants. This will prevent them from getting out of control, and it'll also maintain airflow throughout your garden, which will ultimately lead to less disease problems and pest problems. This is a new variety of cherry tomato I'm growing this year, and it's called Blueberries Cherry Tomato from Wild Boar Farms. It's really unique. It has a nice purpley look. When these tomatoes are fully ripened, they take on kind of a nice, I don't even know how to describe it, just kind of a reddish, burgundy, purplish look. So overall, I just really like the Blueberries cherry tomatoes. They're really cool. I've never really grown such a unique variety before, but I definitely plan on doing so in the future. One of the things I absolutely love about growing my own vegetables is that there's such a wide range of colors, shapes, and sizes you can grow. With cherry tomatoes, I highly recommend seeking out some more interesting varieties. Don't just go with your standard reds. I mean, those are fine too, but I recommend trying to branch out. Get a nice variety of color that'll really introduce some liveliness into your salads. A new support I'm using for my cherry tomatoes this year is this concrete reinforcement wire trellis that I built in the spring. It's a really simple design and anyone can do it. I put it together in probably half an hour, and so far I'm really liking it. It's really carrying my tomatoes well, and it's a really nice look, especially if you're going in a front yard like I am in the city. Supports are not only great for their functionality in getting your cherry tomato plants up off the ground, increasing light and airflow. If chosen with care, they can really enhance the curb appeal of your vegetable garden. So you may be wondering, what does LucasGrowsBest use to fertilize his cherry tomato plants? In the past few years, fertilizing my tomato plants has been kind of a two-step process. It starts in the spring when I amend my raised beds with various organic amendments. So the compost is just an organic amendment that increases the organic matter in my raised beds and also increases the nutrient levels. Compost contains a lot of great nutrients and micronutrients, which, since they're organic, they're slower release, and over the course of the season, this compost will be sucked up by the cherry tomato plant roots and it'll help them grow. I add some bone meal to my raised bed soil because it's an organic source of phosphorus, and phosphorus is very important when it comes to root development and fruit development. It's what will get your tomato plants off to a strong start and also producing lots of flowers and fruit. Mycorrhizae is a fungi that helps plants take up nutrients, so I like to add a bit of that to my tomato plants in the spring as well. The second part of my cherry tomato fertilizing routine is using Miracle-Gro. Did he say Miracle-Gro? I know a lot of people in the gardening community really hate the use of inorganic fertilizers such as Miracle-Gro. And to be honest, I'm not a huge fan either. I've just been using them for the past few years along with my organic methods because I know that they work. As a rule, I'm not a fan of using any sort of chemicals in the garden, and in the future, I hope to be 100% organic. When I first planted my cherry tomatoes, I gave them some liquid-soluble 15-30-15 Miracle-Gro Bloom Booster fertilizer. Every couple weeks from then on, I'd go around with a small watering can and fertilize each cherry tomato plant with the Bloom Booster fertilizer. The Bloom Booster is high in phosphorus, which is key for promoting root growth and flowering. As the season progressed and the plants started producing lots of flowers and fruit, I switched over to a fertilizer that was higher in potassium. The specific fertilizer I used is Miracle-Gro 18-18-21 tomato plant food. Ever since then, I've been using this fertilizer on my plants once a week. Potassium is what your plants need to pump up those fruits and also to stay healthy throughout the growing season. Cherry tomatoes can produce absolutely massive vines that if you don't control, prune, and support, they'll just get out of control, they'll run amok, and your cherry tomato garden will just become a huge mess of leaves, allowing no light or airflow throughout the plants. The spacing I found that works great for my cherry tomatoes is about 2 feet, and that's for these single-stemmed cherry tomatoes. So if you prune your cherry tomatoes to a single stem, 2 feet should be adequate. If you're not really pruning your cherry tomatoes and you're just letting them grow up a cage sort of support method, I would highly recommend at least 3 feet of space. Ultimately, the spacing is dependent on the varieties you're growing and also the support methods you're using. Try some different spacings in your garden and see which one works best for you, because different people have different growing conditions, their plants grow at different rates. Having good spacing between your cherry tomato plants will allow the leaves to dry out after a rain or a dewy morning. This will prevent disease because a lot of diseases thrive in moist, humid environments. Also, having good spacing will allow the sunlight to get in there and hit more of the leaves. Ultimately, this will lead to increased photosynthesis, which will give you healthier plants that are more robust and produce more fruit. And at the end of the day, when it comes to cherry tomatoes, isn't that the name of the game? Something that's really important when it comes to growing cherry tomatoes is irrigation. You gotta make sure you're giving your cherry tomato plants the water that they need to grow healthy and strong. When you've just planted and your plants are still young, you wanna make sure you're giving them water whenever the soil starts to dry out. This is gonna ensure that they develop a good root system and that they don't dry out and die. Once your plants start to get more established, there's some different watering approaches you can take. Last year, what I did with my cherry tomatoes is I only watered when I felt that the soil was almost bone dry. So what I would do is I would go outside and stick my finger into the soil and feel. If I felt any moisture, then I wouldn't water. My theory behind this was that this would encourage the tomato plant's roots to really dig deep into the ground where they can access more water and nutrients more easily. Ultimately, having a bigger, stronger root system will lead to a more robust plant that can produce more fruit. So using this method, I would absolutely soak the soil about once a week. Again, the idea is to water infrequently but deeply, which will encourage a really strong root system which can support more fruit. The watering method I'm trialing this year is a little different. So when I first planted my tomato plants, I watered them really deeply. I really soaked that root system to ensure that they get off to a real good start. Then once the plants got going, I just watered them once a week deeply, like I did last year. Here's what I did differently though. Once the plants started producing flowers and fruit, I started watering shallowly but frequently. I've been watering for 12 minutes every day in the morning, starting at 7 a.m. And I've been using my automatic irrigation system for this. So it's really efficient and I actually don't have to do any work. The idea behind this method is that once the plant starts setting flowers and thickening up with fruit, basically the root system doesn't really grow much anymore. Most of the root system has already developed, and therefore allowing the soil to dry out in between waterings won't actually develop much bigger of a root system. This addition of water every day will ensure that tomato plants always have enough water, and this will theoretically prevent cracking of the fruits because you won't have all this fluctuation in water. So instead of having big water, dry out, big water, dry out, now you have small water, small water, small water, small water. So far, I haven't really noticed a difference, but that remains to be seen because the season still has over a month left to go, so these plants can still grow a lot. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. My tips on how to grow cherry tomatoes. Hope you learned something, hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any sort of questions about growing cherry tomatoes or any other sort of vegetable, just leave a comment down below. I'll be sure to get back to you.